Hi Dons, my name is Alyssa Cressman and I'm one of our Residence Life Managers in the Department of Residence. Part of my role specifically is helping to support students who've been involved in incidents of gendered violence while at Laurier. What that means is that when you have a student who discloses an act of gender violence to you, I help support that student by connecting them to resources here on our campus as well as in our local community, and I can meet with that student and help facilitate whatever it is that they're interested in pursuing as a support or resource for them. So to start at the beginning and give you a bit more information about gender violence and sexual assault, we have some definitions here that Laurier uses. One is that gendered violence is, and I'm going to check my notes to make sure I say it right, anything that reinforces gender inequality. So a student may experience gender violence in the form of comments that are made to them based on their gender. It might be that they feel like they have been discriminated against based on their gender, or they're being harassed based on their gender. So it's really up to the individual themselves to define for themselves whether or not they think something they're experiencing is gender violence. Sexual assault is what we define as any time someone engages in any sort of sexual contact without the consent of the other person. And that may include things like kissing, touching, and all the way up to intercourse. And again, it's up to the student themselves to try and define for themselves whether or not they consider it a sexual assault and whether or not they gave consent. What you might find is that a student might come and talk to you because they're not sure if something that they've experienced is gender violence or sexual assault, and they may be questioning and have a lot of confusing feelings about an experience that they've had. What's important for you to remember is that when a student comes to you, what you can do is tell them that you believe them, that you're here to listen to them, and that you're not here to define what their experience is and tell them whether or not what they experienced is gender violence or sexual assault. That's up for them to determine. However, we do have a procedure in residence that you are going to have to follow if a student comes to you to disclose something like this has happened to them. What you need to do is call the RLAC on call. This would happen at any time of the day, whether it's Monday to Friday during business hours or it's on the weekend or in the evening. You're always going to call the RLAC on call when someone comes and discloses to you any act of gendered violence or sexual assault. The RLAC on call is then going to talk with you to learn a little bit more about the situation and what it is that the student has shared with you. They're then going to come and attend the call, and depending on what information you have learned from the student, they're either going to speak with you or they're going to come in and talk to the student. This might feel a little bit awkward and unnatural to you, that someone has come to confide something very personal and now you're having to bring in someone else to talk to them. But what's really important for you to know is that when that RLAC comes to the situation, they're not there to ask the student to share their story again. They're not there to ask any specifics of the incidents or ask any detailed questions. What they're there to do is to talk with a student and assess what their immediate needs may be. So assessing with a student if they are feeling safe in residence and on campus, if they require any attention due to physical injury, so does the student need to go to the hospital at that moment, and then deciding if in that moment we need to refer them to one of our experts on campus or in the community. The RLAC on call is actually always going to call me as well, so I'm going to be involved in that conversation. And part of the reason I get involved in that conversation is to make the determination of whether or not there's any risk or greater risk to campus safety. Sometimes that means that the student has shared a name of another individual who's involved, and maybe that person is known to us and has a history of this behavior, and therefore we have a concern for the greater safety of their community. So that's where I kind of come in that on-call process of trying to determine whether or not we have any safety and security concerns. I also get involved when we decide that two students were involved in the incident and one student is not feeling comfortable with the other person having access to their building. We may need to come to campus and restrict someone from residence or temporarily relocate them depending on the situation until we can have them come into our office and we can have a further conversation with them. When your RLAC comes, they're going to explain to a student a number of supports that are available in our local community and on campus, and we're really lucky that we have a bunch. We have a gender violence support advocate who can help to explain to a student many different options. We also have our counseling services here at the Wellness Center, where students can make an appointment to see a counselor. We can help facilitate if a student would like to report what happened to either our special constables or the Waterloo Regional Police. And we can also facilitate for a student to go and visit the St. Mary's Hospital Sexual Assault Response Center, which is a great facility that will help answer any questions a student might have about potential physical harm or physical contact or physical consequences of unprotected sex. So if they're wondering things about pregnancy, being exposed to sexually transmitted infections, they can go to the hospital and get a lot of those questions and those supports administered, and we can actually help them to arrange transportation there. And that's where the RLAC can help explain what would happen if they chose any of those supports. If the student chooses that they don't want anything at that moment, they're still going to receive follow-up communication from me. I'm going to send them an email within 24 hours and have a conversation with them, again reiterating the supports that are available and also making possible connections for academic accommodation, residence, and connecting them again to those community resources if they decide they'd like that. So this is definitely a situation that has a lot of different outcomes to it. It has a lot of nuance, and no two situations you encounter will ever be the same. So all I can reiterate to you is that if a student comes and discloses something of this nature, to make them feel comfortable with you, to tell them that you support them and that you believe them, and then to let them know that you're going to call your RLAC, who's going to be able to come and talk to them more about supports that we can make available to them. Finally, I'm going to follow up with you, our student staff, to make sure that you're feeling okay after this situation, because I know this can be something really tough to hear from your students. If they're sharing things with you that are of a very personal nature, it may also trigger some feelings or past experiences you have had. So our department is also going to make sure that we reach out to you and connect you with supports that you might need as someone who is receiving the disclosure and is hearing this information from your student. Definitely, if you have any questions about this topic, feel free to reach out to your RLAC or to me, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it more.